Hey everybody, Smart Silver Stacker here. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to today's live stream. So how undervalued is silver really? We'll take a look at one metric today which suggests that it may be possible that we see four-digit prices for silver before this bull market is completed. So stick around. We're going to get to that in just a minute. Before we get to that, I just want to take a look at silver's chart here, give you a quick update on what's going on. We're also going to talk about what has been happening in China since they reopened following their Lunar New Year holiday, and also a bit about some of the fundamental factors, especially a major supply disruption, which is in the works for silver, which may catalyze a move to these higher silver prices. So stick around. And if you want to learn how you can potentially win some free silver, then check this out.
For the first time ever, SD Bullion is giving away 2 monster boxes of silver coins, but not just any silver. Learn more today at sdbullion.com/sweepstakes.
All right, so you can check out SD Bullion with the link down in the description. It's right by my gold and silver. Now, this right here is the 1 hour chart of silver that we're taking a look at first. And I mean, what we have going on today actually is, I think, a pretty good sign for silver's recent run up. Silver itself down about 1.5% on the day. But if you take a look at the miners, you've got the SIL ETF up 1.3%, the SILJ up 2.42%. So a pretty strong day for the miners, despite the fact that we are off the highs of the day in silver and slightly in the red, right? We are also just coming off of this big run up that we had in the end of last week, right? So this looks to me like a flagpole. Here's your flag or triangle consolidation, and silver is just basing out here before it continues running higher. Now, I had shared a analysis of the daily chart of silver, which I'm going to pull it up here in just a moment, but this is zooming out to the daily here. So this orange triangle is the one we were looking at on that hourly chart. And you can see, again, this is just likely a consolidation as the silver price prepares to move higher. Not that surprising that we got some resistance right here, as this was the closing price of the little bounce we got off that major correction at the end of January, right? So earlier, when we had discussed a possible inverse head and shoulders bottom, we had talked about there maybe being some resistance here around this 92 level, but it looks like maybe this was the space. And this is kind of a zone, I think, of resistance that we're going to see. Once silver gets above this, it's off to the races, right? So not surprising that we see a little hesitancy, a little consolidation here. But we're going to cover some news here which suggests to me that we could get a catalyst to break us above this resistance. And we'll get to that in just a moment. But, we talked about four-digit silver prices. So you're probably wondering what I'm talking about. Well, this was the headline yesterday that kind of brought this to mind, right? So yesterday, we had a pretty sharp drop in the U.S. stock market indexes. The Dow was down 800 points. This was surrounding comments that the president had made about tariffs. He's upping these global tariffs now to 15%. So that's spooking markets a bit. And also, there's this whole AI scare trade thing. IBM shares dropped significantly following an announcement that one of these large language models was going to be able to help with COBOL modernization, updating code. So software companies, tech companies coming under some pressure as there is speculation that AI may be putting some of them out of a job, right? And so it gave me the idea to go take a look at this chart, which is the Dow Jones Industrial Average divided by the silver price. And I mean, it doesn't take, much TA skills here to draw a trend line between these 2 points and to see that recently with silver's breakout, it has fallen below critical resistance here. Now, if we invert this chart and we bring it to the silver divided by Dow Jones Industrial Average chart, this might make a little more sense. So as this chart is rising, that means that silver is becoming more valuable relative to stocks, right? And you can see we're actually still very low, but that breakdown below support on the inverse chart is now a breakout above resistance, right? On this silver to Dow Jones ratio chart. And this is what I'm talking about when I say we could get to 4-digit silver prices, like in this case, $2,700. It's not, speculation, it's just math. If you look at where silver has gone in the past relative to stocks, so dividing just the silver price by the Dow, you can see that silver is still incredibly cheap. And we did just have this breakout. Now, if I zoom in, this is a weekly chart, you can see we had the breakout. Now, that was January's silver high, right? When it was above $120. And then we had a bit of a retest here. It's fallen, bounced, and now it's moving higher. Pretty much what you would expect following a breakout from a long-term resistance like this, a resistance that goes back more than 40 years. So if you do the math here and you take a look at where the Dow is, now the Dow right now is above 4880. It's had a bit of a recovery. Right now it's at 49 and change. So, I made this yesterday, but I'm actually going to show you a Twitter post or an X post where I shared this image and kind of share some of my insights here. So the silver to Dow ratio broke a 40-year downtrend recently, right at the end of 2025. We cleared long-term resistance. We retested it. Now the ratio is rising again. At today's Dow, around 4880, so using yesterday's price following that correction, to reach the 2011 ratio, the silver price of the stock market, stayed where it's at, would need to rise to $195 per ounce. Now, also, and some people, rightly pointed this out, silver doesn't have to rise for this chart to go up. You could see stocks correcting, right? If silver stays exactly where it is and you see a sharp downturn in stocks, that would also lead to this chart rising. So that's an important thing to think about here. But I think what's more likely, given the fact that any major stock downturn will be met with a lot of money creation, trying to use the Fed and the printing press to reinflate those bubbles, it's actually much more likely that you see the stock market continuing to rise, but that silver just outpaces it. So in that case, you'd actually need a higher than $195 ounce price, because if the stock market continues to rise, then you would need, silver to rise even more to hit this level because of the way this chart works. It's just one asset measured against another. You're taking dollars out of the equation, basically. And then assuming that the Dow stays where it is today, in order to get to the level from 1980, you actually need silver above $2,700 an ounce. It's higher than that. So, it just gives you food for thought. Some people think that silver is done with its bull run, that 120 was a blow off top, and that, silver now at current valuations is not a buy. Now, to be fair, it's not as cheap as it was, right? Silver at 20 or 30 bucks was like the deal of a lifetime. And I was saying that at the time, and I was, stacking a lot myself. But still, when you look at it relative to other assets, it's still very cheap. And, let's say that you buy some silver now, and I'm not giving anybody financial advice, by the way. I don't tell anybody what to do in terms of investments, but just as a thought experiment, let's say you buy some silver now and it doesn't move at all, but the Dow crashes. Well, if you think about it, your silver is still more valuable then. And even though, that's one possibility, you could sell your silver then and buy stocks. I think it's much more likely that you see, maybe both things happen, right? Stocks correct or silver run higher. But even more likely is the scenario I outlined earlier, where the dollar just gets decimated, which, the fundamentals kind of support that, the exploding debts and deficits, and you see stocks running higher, but you see silver running higher even faster, right? And then you can still, at some point, like maybe if you get to this ratio again, sell some of your hard assets and buy the, cheap paper at that point, right? It's all about like cycles, probabilities, etc. But, silver, when you look at this chart, I think it's pretty clear it's still very cheap. Now, stocks, on the other hand, very expensive, right? This is the Shiller PE ratio. This is the S&P 500. What they do is they go back and they base this number on the average inflation-adjusted earnings from the previous 10 years. That's known as the cyclically adjusted PE ratio or CAPE ratio, a PE10 or the Shiller PE ratio. But basically, they try to smooth out all the noise. They account for inflation, and then they give you an idea of the relative valuation of stocks over time. And right now, we're at 39.78. It's the highest this measure of stock market values has ever been in history, with the exception of the 2000 tech bubble, right? So with that exception, even the Great Depression, roaring 20 stock market boom right before the big crash, 31.48. Right now we're at 39.78. 2008 or 2007, prior to the crash, 27.55. Right, the peak here in the 60s. What was that with like the Nifty 50? That bubble, 2370. So right now stocks are incredibly overvalued historically. And so it also suggests that we're likely to see a correction in that chart, right? So multiple kind of data points confirming this outlook. Silver is very cheap relative to stocks. All right, so in other news, we had China reopen trading. I'm just going to refresh this here and make sure we get the most recent data here out of the Shanghai Gold Exchange. So right now, silver trading around 21,360. Okay. If you do the math, that comes out to around $3,091.73 per kilo. If you further do the math, that comes out to, I haven't done it ahead of time. Hold on. Let me do it real quick. You got to divide that number by 32.15. So that comes out to about $96.16 right now for an ounce of gold or ounce of silver on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. Right now in the US, 87.25. That's the current spot price. So premiums are starting to get a bit bigger, about $9 premium right now in Shanghai over Western prices. To me, this supports the idea that silver is about to resume its move higher. Just a little bit of a cooling off today. Again, the miners, SILJ here up 2.9% today. Pretty good for a day that silver is down. Means that the markets are not convinced that silver is not heading higher. Same deal with gold. Gold's down 1.18%. The GDX, Gold Miners ETF, up 0.86%. Pretty good day. Well off the lows of the session. The miners started the day in the red, and they've caught a bid significantly here. So, these are all pretty positive signs for the silver market here in the short term. Let's see. This is from Oriental Ghost on X. He posts the closing prices for silver on the Shanghai Gold Exchange and the Shanghai Futures Exchange for February 24th. So according to his data, silver here on the Shanghai Gold Exchange, $96.99, so even a little higher than the price I just quoted you. And then this is the US dollar per ounce equivalent over here. For silver on the Shanghai Futures Exchange, up over $100. So I guess the Shanghai Gold Exchange is kind of like their spot market, and then they also have the Shanghai Futures Exchange where they trade futures, just like in Western markets. They have contracts that go out into the future. There's also a current spot price. So right now in China, over $100 on the futures market for an ounce of silver. Now, let's talk about a catalyst here in the very near future that could lead to drastically higher silver prices, especially physical silver. So this is the Mineral Commodity Summaries 2026 from the USGS for silver. You can find this on the USGS website, usgs.gov. This is the most recent document. They publish one of these per year. And so this is for 2026. They've got the data from 2025 here. Just want to show you a few things and talk about why there very well may be some significant shortages in silver supply chains. So this is production right here. This is what we produce, right, from mining and recycling. So a little over, what is this, in tons, I guess? Metric tons. So 2,200 metric tons. Now, we use consumption here, 9,400 metric tons of silver in the U.S. in 2025. Now, the first thing I want to draw your attention to is look at how much higher the consumption is in 2025 versus 2024. Goes from 6,320 to 9,400. That's a pretty big move. And then if you look at the previous years, right, the last 4 years, the highest was 7,950, except for 2025, 9,400. So big increase in the amount of silver being consumed in the U.S. And also notice that 7,600 of those tons were imports in 2025. So Domestic production, 2,200. Imports, 7,600. So we're using way more silver than we actually produce, and we've got to import that. Now, where does that come from? Well, according to this document, 47% of that comes from Mexico, the world's largest silver producer, and that makes sense. They make a ton of silver there, more than any other country. They're right on our southern border. So a lot of the silver that comes into the United States comes from the other North American countries, Mexico, and then 18% from Canada. That's number two. But in Mexico, the lion's share, 47%. Check out this headline from CNBC. Mexico violence after cartel boss killing slows cross-border trade, hitting air freight, trucking, and ports. And my understanding is that members of this cartel, whose leader was killed, sort of a titular leader is my understanding, not necessarily an operational head. I mean, I don't know very much about, the organization or how that really all works, but they certainly didn't like that this guy was killed by the Mexican authorities with U.S. intelligence. And so they're causing quite a ruckus down there in Mexico, burning vehicles, setting up checkpoints on streets, shutting down traffic. So, a lot of disruption in Mexico. And my understanding is that one of the things they've been doing is digging ditches across roads to prevent government armored vehicles from getting through. And a lot of this is occurring in regions with a lot of silver production, right? There was already a lot of security issues for the miners before this all happened, having to deal with the cartels, paying them protection rackets, etc. But now transportation of silver is becoming, I'm sure, a much dicier enterprise than it was before a couple days ago when this took place. What was it, on Sunday? So, this very well could lead to some significant, if, maybe only short-term disruptions to silver supply coming into the U.S. Of course, silver designated a critical mineral recently by the USGS, and for this very reason, that we're so dependent on outside sources for our silver. And if that does take place, then that likely means that physical silver in your possession in North America, in the United States, is going to be a lot more valuable. I mean, just my take, right? Supply and demand being what they are, if there's a significant disruption to supply and a rather inelastic industrial demand for silver, then you could definitely see the silver price moving much higher in the very near future. And I think that, when you zoom out and you look at the long-term chart for silver, it kind of confirms that that is what we are likely to see, right? This chart we always keep going back to, but because it's so important, this breakout from this decades-long cup and handle pattern coinciding with things like, the breakdown from decades-long resistance or break above. This is the 3-month chart that we were looking at before, the silver to Dow ratio, right? So you've got a cup and handle breakout on the silver chart. You've got a breakout here. You've got, you can look at other ratios, right? The M2 to silver supply. We had a breakdown here, same time at the end of at the end of 2025, had a breakdown below critical support. So, the lower this goes, the higher silver is relative to all the fiat currency they've created. Yeah, we did actually touch the 2011 ratio on this one, just as silver was, hitting around $120. And I had forecast that we would see some significant support on this chart, meaning resistance for the silver price when we hit that 2011 ratio. And, I just didn't anticipate how violent that move would be. But now we've bounced. Now we've consolidated. I think we'll touch this. Next time we touch it, we'll probably break through it. And that means that we're headed to much higher silver prices. So anyway, just a few charts to take a look at today. And an interesting way to think about the valuation of silver, right? Instead of thinking about it necessarily purely in fiat dollar terms, looking at the silver price relative to other assets, like on this silver to Dow ratio chart. And, sometimes people ask me the question, like, when do you know when to sell your silver? Like, are you just going to hold it forever? Are you going to sell? Well, charts like this are a much more important way to inform that decision, I think, than a purely fiat price model. You want to look at the silver price relative to other assets. And right now, clearly this is still a buy zone for silver. Like maybe when we get up to the 2011 high or the 1980 high, those would be places to consider exiting your position or rolling it into something else. But right now, I mean, silver, even though it's gone up a lot over the past year, is still very cheap relative to other assets. So not financial advice, just my thoughts. And it puts into perspective really how undervalued silver is and how much higher this bull market is likely to take us. Do me a favor, follow me over on x.com/stacksmarter to get posts like this. Subscribe to the channel, click the bell notification icon, like the video if you haven't done that already. Leave a comment down below, that helps a lot. And thank you very much for everybody for tuning in. Appreciate each and every one of you. And I will catch you again soon. Thanks for watching, everybody. Stay safe and happy stacking. Smart Silver Stacker